Welcome to another virtual event with The Source by Bank Plus. The Source was created to connect and educate and empower working women. And while we never expected a global pandemic to thwart our networking efforts, we've always strived to provide on-demand education opportunities. And that's what we have today with our guest, Frances Croft. Thank you so much for joining us. Frances joined the Women's Foundation of Mississippi as Director of Strategic Initiatives in 2017, where she focuses on advocacy efforts, leadership programs, fund development, and special projects. Prior to the Women's Foundation, she practiced law as a prosecutor with the Mississippi Attorney General's Office for 11 years. That's impressive. She serves on a couple of boards of directors herself, including the Mississippi Children's Museum and Mississippi Symphony Orchestra. Welcome, Frances. Thanks so much for being with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the Women's Foundation.
Sure. Well, I started out as an attorney who volunteered a lot, and through a happy set of circumstances was able to transition to working full-time in the nonprofit world in 2017. And just love having a career that I can be so passionate about and enjoy my job every single day.
Yeah. The Women's Foundation hosts regular educational events, one of which is She's on Board, which is why we have you here today, that I'm really excited to talk to you about. You and I were talking before we got set up here about women serving on boards of directors and how it feels like a really intimidating thought. It feels very exclusive. It feels like you really have to have a lot of experience and a lot of success under your belt. Why do you think this is an important topic for us to discuss?
Yes, we were, and I made a joke about clearly it's not because
here we are.
Here we are, and it's a fun topic to myth bust because all women need to feel comfortable stepping into leadership positions, which is what caused us to want to host She's on Board back when we first started it in 2018. So She's on Board is a board training program that is open to all Mississippi women. We've hosted it for several years now, and it has a very wonderfully low cost of entry. It's only $15. If you look around the country, most similar programs like this, leadership trainings, day-long workshops, are several hundred, if not thousands of dollars. And so it's just really fun to be able to have one that is wide open. And even if that 15 is a barrier, we offer scholarships. And we do that with this wonderful corporate sponsors, community partners like the Junior League of Jackson, and volunteer trainers who come in and help us. We focus on areas like introductory nonprofit finance classes. We do strategic planning introductions, have panel discussions about different pathways into leadership, and really just try to dig into what someone should consider before saying yes to serving on a nonprofit board, but also empowering women to say yes when they're asked to consider leadership, because that can be something that we as women often don't have front of mind for many reasons, including time management, self on that one. So that's the why of the background of that particular program. When more women are seated at decision-making tables, you often end up with more equitable decisions as the outcome, especially decisions that are more thoughtful about how policies impact women and families. And that is something we really need in Mississippi.
I heard Madeleine Albright say one time that we are all better off with another woman in the room. And that struck me as so simple, but something that I had not really considered. And I love that the Women's Foundation offers this program, not only that you offer it, but that you make it attainable and approachable to all women. So you mentioned that you get a lot of questions about board service. What are those questions that you get?
Yes, it comes up in random things, whether it's carpool line or it used to come up in Kroger. But a lot of people want to know about how do you get involved in board service, and then also people want to know how do you decide what to say yes to. And my advice is to follow your sincere passions. Let it be organic. Don't try to force it. Don't look at it as some sort of resume ladder climb. You know, if there is an organization or if there is a subject area that you have a true interest in, volunteer for that organization. Put your time and your money and your heart into that place, and that will bear fruit. Make sure that if it's an organization that does any sort of lobbying or advocacy work, that you are really well informed about what they do and what their position statements are, so that you feel really comfortable and are really firmly grounded in what they may be out there doing in the world. How are you going to feel when they're on the news or you're on the news? That's true. You know, those are things you want to consider before saying yes and before pursuing that. I think just like you mentioned earlier, I do think that there sometimes is a little bit of a mysteriousness about board service, and I like to talk about it just to pop that bubble a little bit, when we can.
What do you think boards are? You mentioned volunteer for organizations that you're passionate about. What do you think those boards are looking for in a board member or volunteer?
So part of my prep work for She's on Board involves talking to different Mississippi nonprofits. I send out surveys and try to get information from a wide variety of nonprofits working in Mississippi so that I can give this information accurately. One of my favorite questions to ask is, how many times a year does your board meet? And you get everything from once to every month. And then what is your financial obligation? And you get everything from $0 to $10,000. And what is your board size? And you get everything from 7 to 40. So there's a wide variety in what boards are looking for to meet those different needs. Right now, a lot of boards are looking to really intentionally expand their diversity, and their inclusion efforts are really focused, not just organization-wide, but really targeting their board makeup. So that would include versus gender, race, profession. You know, lawyers, I love us, we're a delight, but golly, we do tend to take up some board seats, so often looking for people who are not lawyers. That's not to say that lawyers aren't wanted, but they might be there for other reasons, right. Not just for legal reasons. Beyond that, the number one thing they always say are fundraising, help with fundraising. This is the sidebar I always take to say, if you're interested in board service, you must be honest about the fact that you have to be comfortable with the give, the get, or the get off. You must be willing to give money yourself. You have to have skin in the game. And that doesn't mean it has to be a huge check with a lot of zeros. It just has to be an amount that is of meaning to you. And that can be whatever amount, it's just a percentage that's of meaning to you. So you have to give of your own person. And then you have to be willing to help get money. Let's be a door opener, make some phone calls, introduce some people. And if you're not willing to do those two things, it's time to get off the board. So that's my soapbox on that. I'll put that away. And then after fundraising, they're looking for help with, everybody's always looking for help with finance skills. So they're always looking to build up that pipeline of people who are well-trained in finance, because everybody needs a really great treasurer, and those can be hard to find. So they're trying to build up that pipeline, and then strategic planning, business relationships, strategic planning, those are some of the other skills they're looking for, but number one is always that fundraising connection.
Okay, say you've met your goal, you have been approached by the board of your dreams to be a member. What is some questions you should ask yourself before joining the board?
Taking inventory of your time, being really honest about how much time you have to give. If you say yes to this, you say no to something else, and being thoughtful about that, taking it seriously. It's not a hobby. If you're just looking to build your resume, Kim Burke said this at our first She's on Board. Kim Burke was our board chair for the Women's Foundation at that time. She's the dean of the business school at Millsap. So if you're looking just to build your resume, there are lots of other ways to do it much more easily than board service. So being honest with yourself about that. You need to have candid conversations with whoever's approaching you about what the financial commitment is, what the time commitment is. They may say, yeah, we only have one annual meeting of the board a year. That's great. Do they also have 12 committee meetings that you have to go to? Because, so candid meetings, candid conversation about the financial commitment and the time commitment, but also about any sort of conflicts that come up that might. Do you have a personal family business that this board is going to enter in contracts with, and you're going to be conflicted out of every board conversation? Well, that's not going to be helpful to anybody. So that's not going to be a good fit. So just being really, really thoughtful about how you're going to be of service to them is really helpful to have those conversations on the front end. Oh, and one more thing, before you say yes to being on a board, it's also nice to hop online and look at their most recent 990 form. That's a form that all nonprofits fill out for IRS purposes. They're available online, and it can just give you a good little snapshot of where they are in time and space. And another fun thing to do, if it's appropriate, is to talk to current board members, former board members, if you have friends or contacts who have been on that board. See what their experience was.
Once you are approached by a board, it was likely because you are professional, you have a good reputation, you've got experience in a certain area. Why are those aspects of board service important?
Well, you're not just serving on that board as a hobby or as a check mark. You're there for a legal reason. You have fiduciary duties to that nonprofit. You have things that you were required to do by law. You have a duty of care, loyalty, and obedience, and we could get into that, but I would probably recommend maybe that you come to Shoes on Board for the full scope on that. But you really owe it to the nonprofit, and you owe it to yourself. There are situations where you have taken on personal responsibility and personal liability for the activities of that nonprofit. So you must be aware, not just be a rubber stamp, but really come to those meetings prepared. Read the minutes, read the financials, understand them, ask questions if you need to. Good staff and good nonprofit boards are open for questions and enjoy having engaged board members. So that's not a bad thing. Questions are good. The duty to care, I always think of as the duty to ask questions.
What are some general expectations of someone serving on a board of directors?
Absolutely, that they are going to be active, that they are going to positively represent that organization in the community and in their conversations with each other and in the broader world. I would say it's really important that they are respectful of other board members, that you can agree to disagree as long as everyone has the best interests of the organization at heart. It's fine to disagree as long as you do so in a kind manner and in a respectful manner. You know, if you get a couple of attorneys on a board, you're going to disagree about something, right. And that's fine, but just to do so in a respectful way.
Right. You're almost not doing the hard work if you agree on everything.
If you're a rubber stamp and everybody just sits around and nods, I get concerned.
Right. You taught me about the acronym, the WAIT approach, and I love it. I think you can apply it to any area of your life. But tell me what it is and why it's important to remember in board service.
Absolutely. And I told you this. I wish I could remember where I first heard it so I could give proper credit. But it's WAIT. Why am I talking? And sometimes you can sit in a board meeting and you realize that there is somebody who is dominating the conversation, and that can be challenging because then you're not hearing all the voices at the table. So especially my beloved attorneys, again, we can be so delightful, but really have to watch out for this, that why am I talking? Why am I talking at the board table? Am I making a point that has to be made, or am I just being an echo chamber? But if you're in a board leadership position, you know, to make sure that you're getting all the voices at the table and you're not just being the person with the megaphone. But yeah, why am I talking? Why am I not talking? Also, I think is a helpful one too. If you're sitting at the board table and it's been a couple meetings and you've not said anything, that can be a helpful question to ask as well.
Our members are professional women, they're working women. Most of the time they have a job or are looking for a job. And I would imagine a question that would come up is, how will board service affect my professional life? How will it interfere or not into what I'm about to do? So what happens when board service and your professional life conflict a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think one that is important to ask and important to be super candid with wherever you are in life. If you are employed, for sure, before you say yes to that board position, you need to have that conversation with your employer. It may actually be in your employee handbook that you have to ask your employer before you say yes. I can speak for the Women's Foundation that it's in our handbook that before you take a volunteer position, you need to get clearance from the executive director. So beware of that. And then once you're at the table, you need to make sure that you're following whatever conflict of interest policy exists at your both employer, your place of business, and on the place and the nonprofit as well. So nonprofits generally have a conflict of interest statement that all the board members must sign every year. The IRS asks you to do that. So that you're following that and you're being really transparent. Be careful with your time. Be careful with your emailing during the day. I think too, when you're in a board meeting, be aware that you need to be off your phone. You need to be present. COVID has made this challenging for all of us. If you're meeting on Zoom, still be present. Keep the sidebar conversations to a minimum. Show up on time, show up prepared. Know that from a career perspective, a lot of referrals get made from that kind of interaction. Certainly people ask me a lot of time for a referral for a CPA, for an advisor, for whatever, and a lot of times that Venn diagram of your community contacts, it's people that you wouldn't have overlapped with maybe otherwise. And so I would say just be aware that you are putting your professional base forward in that situation. And so to be aware of that. And so you're showing up not just as yourself, but just you're showing up as your best self in that room.
Right. Because you're not only representing yourself as an individual, but you're, by extension, representing your company as well. So that's something that's important to consider, I think. Can you be on too many boards?
Oh, absolutely. You can stretch yourself so thin that you're the mile wide and the inch deep. And you're not being a good board member to any of them because you're not being present at any of them. Also, I think I would keep in mind too that, like I talked about, one of the things that you need to do as a board member is help with fundraising. We all have limited spheres of influence, and if you start going back to your friends 17 times a year asking for money, they're not going to take your calls anymore. So I think just being careful about that is helpful. So yeah, yes, you can absolutely be on too many boards.
What would you say to future generations of women who are interested in leadership positions and positions on a board of directors? What advice would you give them?
Oh, I love this question. I would probably actually speak to women who are currently on boards or women who are in leadership positions, that once you are at the table, it is imperative, it is your job to bring along other women. I can speak for myself that I would never have taken a step into leadership. I was always happier being in the background, taking out the trash, and doing the background work, except for until some very special friends, a very special woman who came before me who said, you need to think about opting in for some of these leadership positions. And so the power of that and the trajectory, you just never know what the ripple effect would be. And then for younger women, I would say, the younger women I have had the great grace and happy accidents to be with over the last few years, I would say seem to be doing a better job of this, so that's awesome. But to advocate for yourself and to ask questions and to show up and know that this is serious and this is hard work, and it may take a while. If you would like to serve on a board, it may take a while. It may take a few years to have that opportunity show up. but that there are plenty of other ways to be of service in the community besides this that are still really, really important. Volunteerism and community service are worthy no matter what. Here in Mississippi, we have a real challenge in female leadership. For example, our legislature only has about 14% of females in leadership positions. So it is incumbent upon us to encourage women to take board seats, to step into leadership wherever they can. We have a lot of challenges here, and we need all of our organizations running at full speed and as efficiently as possible. So I'm excited to see what our future leaders can help do in that space, especially in encouraging women to be more present.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I know our viewers will want to learn more about the Women's Foundation, about She's on Board, and the other educational programs and the grants that you offer. So can you tell us a little bit about how to reach you and find out more?
Absolutely. We are online, womensfoundationms.org. That way you can find whatever you need to find, and we try to keep that as up to date as possible. This past year during the pandemic, we took She's on Board virtual. So we did She's on Board 2.0, which was an advanced version of our training, and did deep dives into nonprofit finance, strategic planning, conflict resolution, and all sorts of things. So this year we're going to go back to our regular She's on Board, hopefully in person, and we'll be sharing information with that just as soon as we get it planned. We're waiting to see exactly when it will be, because we would very much like it to be in person. But of course we want to do that as safely as possible.
Of course. Thanks again so much for being here. I know everyone loved hearing about the Women's Foundation, about She's on Board, and about your recommendations for board service. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us today. I hope that you will learn more about The Source on thesource.net. If you have a suggestion or a question for us, please submit an email there. I would also love for you to follow us on social media and check out our podcast, Inside Source, on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for joining us.